Didn't listen. So sad. For decades, I'm not the only one who's been saying we need a revolution. No, not a peaceful one. That's what elections are for, you know. But unlike most revolutions, like the ones with guillotines, starvation, roving death squads, we don't have to start from nothing in rubble. We can have the best start ever. It's already ours, in fact. So with this, and herewith, I start my series on the Constitution for the United States of America. But I'm not starting with a preamble. This is going to be a little bit from the inside out, but for a good reason, I think. Hi, I'm Andy Horning, author of Relighting the Torch. Today I'll talk about 4 amendments to our Constitution, starting with what are, in my opinion, the most important 2 sentences in our Bill of Rights, Amendments 9 and 10. They're super simple, yet super important. Amendment 9 describes our expansive rights. Quote, "The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people." Unquote. What that sentence means is that we have infinite, expansive rights. We're supposed to be free to do any peaceful thing we want that doesn't infringe on others' rights or property, unless the right is specifically taken away by constitutions in writing. In other words, we regular folks have got all the rights, powers, and privileges not specifically taken away by authority granted in constitutions in writing, either state or federal. That'll be even clearer shortly. Amendment 10 is the leash on federal power. It's, in fact, finite powers. Quote, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people." Unquote. This should be more immediately understandable. What it means is that our feds have no authority, not specifically granted, in the plain words of the Constitution. Now, it may be hard to define, in fact, it's certainly hard to define, let alone agree, what those words rights and liberties actually are. People fight over those words all the time. But it's obvious we need to limit politicians' power to take those rights and liberties away, whatever those things are. Given the bunk that we've been taught and told for generations about the Constitution's design and intent, understanding these 2 amendments is crucial to properly understanding the rest. So I'll no doubt reiterate the importance of these 2 sentences often. In fact, right now. Amendment 9 means that if the Constitution doesn't clearly say we can't do something, we can do it. We're free to do or not do as we please as long as we're not hurting or robbing anybody else. But Amendment 10 says that if the Constitution doesn't clearly say government can do something, it can't. So there's no such thing as penumbras or extensions of. This is not vague. The Constitution is not vague in this matter. If it's not clear in the writing of the Constitution, it is forbidden. The founders were far more trusting of you with freedom than government with power. If that's not clear enough, there are 2 later amendments that help illustrate how the Constitution, as clarified by Amendments 9 and 10, is supposed to work. Between the 18th Amendment's proposed prohibition in 1917 and its ratification in 1919, it was still understood that in order to grant the federal government any authority to ban the, quote, manufacture, sale, or transportation, unquote, of anything, the Constitution would have to be amended. So while banning the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors proved to be a very stupid thing to do, it was done properly. But to be clear, the 18th Amendment, or what we now call the Prohibition era, prohibited only the, quote, manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors, unquote. I won't read the whole thing here. It's not very long, but the wording is quite clear, and you should read it yourself. It didn't ban the purchase or consumption of anything, just the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors, as those commercial activities were all that could be regulated under the accepted rules of the Republic. Of course, what a republic versus a democracy is actually supposed to be is a big topic for later, though. So, arresting people for buying or consuming liquor was never constitutional, and it was certainly unconstitutional and, not incidentally, mass murderous that agents in New York poisoned alcohol supplies and thus killed around 10,000 people in that era. And that wasn't the only death toll. After creating black markets and stimulating, empowering, entrenching organized crime into our government, some people finally realized that they needed to kill the 18th Amendment. So while the amendment itself was at least procedurally correct, its inaction proved it was a stupid idea and things got crazy. So as of December 5, 1933, the 21st Amendment was ratified, which nullified the 18th Amendment by repealing the federal government's authority to ban the, what? Manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors. There never was any other amendment similar to the 18th, before or since. Nothing like it. So the 21st Amendment removed the federal government's authority to ban the manufacture, sale, or transportation of anything. The federal government never had any authority to ban the purchase or consumption of anything. So, putting this into the context and power of the 9th and 10th Amendments, we the people ought to be free to manufacture, sell, transport, purchase, and consume anything we want. Now, of course, we can argue all we want about whether this is a good idea or not. Maybe banning fentanyl or nukes would be something we'd want to do. But there's a right way to do it, and we've not done that. And the implementation of the 18th Amendment demonstrated very well a key problem of human politics that our founders understood very well. That problem is best articulated as, give them an inch and they'll take a mile. The incremental power grab since the ink was still wet on the Constitution and all following amendments demonstrates the importance of return to core principles and the actual words of the document. Politicians tend to desire power, and they thrive on conflict. Their most insidious tactic is twisting words or even denying their existence. Not all nations have written constitutions. Ours was the first. And the words were not intended for judges and lawyers and politicians as much as they're for us. We're to use those words as both a leash and shock collar on politics. But that means we have to know what these safe words and sometimes wield them like weapons for self-protection. That is how all of this is supposed to work. It's how we're to make politicians our servants instead of vice versa, as is the case today. If you ponder all the preceding as you consider the rest of the Constitution, you'll likely conclude that a huge percentage of what our government does these days, including domestic spying, warrantless searches, institutionalized corruption, violence worldwide, and installing people in prison for our ongoing, costly, global war on drugs, war on terror, war on whatever, it's endless, is all unconstitutional. And you'd be right. It is all unconstitutional. Stay tuned for more in this series, but for much more information in greater depth, please look up Relighting the Torch by Andrew Horning, me, on Amazon. Links are below. Anyway, that's it for this first video in my series on constitutional design. Tell me what you think. Thanks. Liberty or bust.